Hi, this is Marlene, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Whether you're watching a video or listening to a podcast, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. Links to videos or MP3 files can be found on miamighostchronicles.com. Go to marlenepardo.com for information on new book releases. I narrate several podcast series that can be found on major podcast platforms and can also be listened to via Alexa, Sonos, and other home systems. Look for Supernatural Storytime for scary storytelling, Nightshade Diary for classic horror and adventure stories, Stories of the Supernatural for interviews with different guests on the show. If you want to get noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit Strange Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com or find us on Blogspot. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, it's Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing? Good, I hope. I'm well. Well, before I get on to the guest info, which is a first-time guest here in Stories of the Supernatural, I wanted to remind you all to sign up for my newsletter at marlenepardo.com or miamighostchronicles.com. It's a once-a-week newsletter. And usually I write some short article, true crime, spooky story, just weird stuff, and I put in there links to some other podcasts or videos related to it. Also, I announce anything having to do with my books. Like a couple of weeks ago, I was promoting my last release, the Hot Dame on a Cold Slab, which is a true crime book. I had a 100-book giveaway on Goodreads on Amazon, and you know, one of the ways I let everybody know about it is on my newsletter. So by all means, please sign up for it. Number 2, I wanted to talk about a new sponsor that we have. It's called Plan to Stay Safe. And what they do is they have different types of supplies to, non-lethal of course, to keep you safe. Stun guns, pepper sprays, hidden cameras, diversion safes, knives, Kubotans, all the things that you need to stay safe, whether you're at home, whether you're out and about. These are all self-defense and security products that you could purchase because they have very reasonably priced goods to basically give you peace of mind, whatever it is that you might need. They also have a great deal going on, which is any order delivered in the United States, $50 or more gets free shipping. Okay, $50 or more free shipping anywhere in the United States. That is a great deal. So check them out at plantostaysafe.com, plantostaysafe.com. All right, now on to the good part. Let me tell you about the guest that we have here today. His name is Brother Gary Joseph, and in 2005, he had a heart attack, and it stopped his heart. And at once, when he was in the afterlife, immersed in a direct encounter with God, he absorbed multiple spiritual messages. He recounts his near-death experience and the unusual encounters that have continued weekly ever since. He's written 2 books about that, Proof of the Afterlife 1 and 2, where he shares his message of hope and certainty that there is life after death. His stories detail God encounters, chance meetings with angels, visions, dreams, and messages from the other side. Brother Gary has been a vowed brother of the Catholic Order since 2007. He is the founder of the Servants of the Father of Mercy, an association of vowed and lay members in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. The servants follow the rule of St. Benedict, taking vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and its lay members must commit themselves to practicing basic Catholic spirituality and serving homeless people at least 5 hours a month. And I will have a link to his website on the credits of the show, and we'll go ahead and give that information out towards the end of the show. So help me welcome Brother Gary. How are you doing today?
Great, Marlene. It's just awesome to know about you and your show. You're doing such amazing work.
No, it's my pleasure to have you on. And I'm going to ask you, obviously, in the bio information, it notes that you had this near death experience in 2005, but prior to that, had anything happened?
Yes, I was thinking that today before your show, and I remember as a teenager in high school, I briefly I'll just share this so that people
Sure.
can maybe they connect with their past, things that kids don't often think about, as I did not. I would take a break sometimes 5 minutes before the period end. The teacher said, take a break. So we'd lay our heads down. And I noticed starting around freshman year, I had about 4 years during those breaks where I would, of all strange things, I would see airline crashes. And for people that know the early 70s, that was quite a time. The Eastern Airlines, L 1011 that went down in the Everglades,
Yeah,
uh,
yes.
the DC 10 crash in Chicago. Well, I saw these crashes as a teenager, usually about on average, 2 weeks before they happened. And I would come home and tell my parents, and they would be like, "Well, where is it? When is it?" And I said, "I don't know. I just saw it with my head down on my desk." And so that was the beginning. That evidently from the other side, that the person is being groomed, is
Mm-hmm.
what we found out later. So a lot of times, kids that have these gifts and children, they start getting groomed by the other side at an early age. But I did not know that. Of course, you don't know it when you're going through it.
Sure, of
And
course.
then when I was in college, my last year of college, I had a vivid dream and a vision that said I would become an author and that my books would be published by Penguin Putnam.
Okay.
And I was only 19. I shared that with some pastor that don't believe in that kind of stuff. It was so vivid that I had to tell people about it. And after some work of all things in the airline industry in my early career, and I moved to Miami, uh, I uh, I published my first book, Get the Job You Want in 30 Days. I didn't think much of the vision from age 19. And of all weird things, the book gets published by Berkeley. And
Really?
I told God, I said, you had the book thing right, but you had the publisher wrong. I said, I did write a book just as you predicted when I because by this time I was around 1989. I was already late 20s, early 30s, and so some time had gone by. Long story short, in 1993, my editor at Berkeley sent a letter to all the authors, and she said, "I just want to let you know that we are no longer Berkeley Books. We're now Penguin Putnam."
Oh my God. That's incredible.
That amazing.
Yes, yes.
And I felt like an inch tall after that because I 3 years earlier I tell God, you don't have things right.
Right. And you know what's really funny? Because I know that a lot of people sometimes will say people that have had what they think is psychic is basically information that they have stored in their subconscious mind. In other words, that's really where they're drawing it from. They think they don't know it, but they do. But let's face it, there's no way. There's no way you could have known that.
No. Mm-mm.
This wasn't something that somehow you heard or saw and you stored in your subconscious mind. And then how could you ever have known that there was going to be a change in the name of the book company. That's wow. Keep going. That's great.
And it was like humbling. I really felt so small and really humbled because here I am telling off God at age 30.
Yeah.
I'm like, you can't even get the publisher correct,
Oh, it's like, all right. Let me just,
Yeah,
I take that back.
I did. I was like, I'll take that back. And also during that same year, we had not heard from my brother Jimmy for a good 7 years. I don't know, he had a big chip on his shoulder, and he didn't want to talk to anybody. He had his own life. So I had a dream on a Wednesday night around the same time my book got published, and in the dream he was laying on apartment floor, no carpet, no furniture, all by himself, and he was dying in the dream. So I just kind of dismissed that Wednesday night. I go to bed Thursday night, the exact same dream, nothing changed. It was really like plugging in a DVD and seeing the same movie on a second time.
Okay.
And so by now I knew from the book thing and from the airline issues, I learned that I better check these things. So I called an older sister who had friends that knew where my brother was. So they tracked him down, and he was located at that very same moment in St. Francis Hospital in New York. And they discovered that he had pneumonia for the third time. So here we discover that the dream is actually reality. And I told my sister to make sure that he knows that when he gets out of the hospital, he comes to Miami, to my place, and I'm going to take care of him, because as much as I disliked my brother, I still felt it was the right thing to do, because in the dream he was destitute. He had nobody.
Okay.
So we moved him to Miami. He got out of the hospital. My sister bought him an airline ticket, and we found him a little one room over on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
So
let me tell you, that's it. Let me ask you real quick. Before you have these, like you said, these visions, is there anything that kind of gives you like a feel, or does it just come out of nowhere? Or is there something that you say, there's something I feel in my body, or something that I know that I'm going to be seeing something?
No, it really comes out of nowhere. There's like nothing prior to it,
Mm-hmm.
and nothing that really just would cue me that it's going to happen. Now we have a middle sister at this very moment. We've not heard from her since both funerals. My dad's funeral in the early 2000s, my mom's funeral 2010. She had a chip on her shoulder, we understand, and we have not heard from her. But because we didn't hear from her, we took the estate, the house, everything, and all that was mine, plus whatever my other sister did not want, I gave it all to the homeless.
Okay.
I turned it to cash, and I gave it all away. I drove across country and handed it out to the homeless.
Wow.
And so, long story short, this middle sister shows up 10 years later, and she wants stuff from the house. And my older sister said, "Hey, look, I gave it all to him, and he gave it to the homeless." Well, that ended that story. But long story short, a week or two ago, I woke up in the middle of the night, and my middle sister was in the room. So for her, it would have been a dream, because she lives on the East Coast and I live on the West Coast. So because she was in my bedroom, she would have probably been experiencing. And she told me that she took a lot of time to think about it, and that was a good idea that I gave it all to the homeless.
Wow. I thought when you said that, I said, "Oh my God, is that gonna be a?" Those are my dogs having a fit. I'm sorry, everybody. It's just everybody. My audience knows that I have my dogs with me, and I made the mistake. I give them out like little treats and stuff like that, but sometimes
Yeah.
I don't realize because I have rescue. I have 9 rescues. Well,
Oh,
it's a long story, but they all they cluster under my desk because of course, and then if one has one treat and the rest don't, then it becomes like a free for all, and that's what you heard right there. But my audience is used to it because I have a lot of animals and they hear these weird sounds in the background every once in a while, and it's like, yep, that's one of them. But let me ask you, what after your this middle sister, you were saying you saw her basically when you saw her in your room. This was not a dream. This was actually you saw her.
yes, yes. Same way that I saw my dad in 2005. He came twice in the night. I sat up and he had died in 2003,
Mm-hmm.
and he was 2 nights in a row. He was right at the foot of my bed, looking at me. And same with my sister. She was standing on the side of my bed, but she communicated through mental telepathy. It was not audio. She stood there and she spoke and she said, I thought about it and it was a good idea. You gave it all to the homeless, but I did not hear that audibly. I heard it in my mind.
Okay.
And
Okay.
sometimes that happens to me. I don't, sometimes I hear things one of 3 ways. I'll hear it audibly, or I'll hear it mentally, or a third way, I'll hear it internally, like a set of sensing thoughts,
Okay. Okay.
if that makes
Right. Yes,
sense.
absolutely. Right. You hear people that are clairaudient that actually hear it. But
Yeah.
I've also heard of what you're describing, which is you have almost like an internal knowing, hearing, if you want to call it that,
Yes.
which it's relayed that way.
Yes.
And
Uh,
so let me ask you this, but in between, because you're telling me your dad passed away in the early 2000s, your mom passed away in 2010, and in between this, in 2007 is when you had your experience?
yeah, it was 2005. I had thyroid surgery in the summer in August, and they took out half. It was a large growth, about the size, they said, of a golf ball, and they left the other side in. And about 3 weeks after that surgery, the piece that was left, it went hyper, which didn't surprise me because I was experiencing that for many years. I was having where it would overhype to compensate for the tumor, and so I would have these like rushes of energy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so, after that surgery, uh, it calmed down for 3 weeks, but then that one night, it just surged with the hormones at about 1:15 in the morning, and I woke up very anxious. The hormones, I did not know it, but were already off kilter, and I'm pacing. I turn the TV on. The next thing I know is that the heart just takes off. Like I
Yeah,
saw
you
a
get
line.
something like tachycardia, where you get that
Uh-huh.
heartbeat real quick.
Yep. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it was crazy. It went from 1 to 1,000 in a split second,
Whoa.
and I just knew I was dying. It was a complete awareness that this was it. I just had a very strong uh, sense that as I collapsed on the living room floor, I just knew that the energy from the body was exiting, I could feel the energy, the electricity going out the 2 feet and the two hands. And I thought to myself, well, as soon as that goes out, I must be dead. I was able to kind of follow the stream,
Mm-hmm.
and sure enough, as soon as that sensation ended, then I was above my body, and the clock on the TV said 1:15. That's from me seeing it outside of my body, and then immediately I was brought before God the Father. I transitioned immediately from my body to God the Father, basically the creator of the entire universe,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm on the other side of a gray screen because he said you cannot see me,
Okay.
and so he has a big gray screen in front of us. But I knew it was him because the screen would rip, just like you see in science fiction. There would be rips
Mm-hmm.
constantly, like just ripping the screen, and then these pieces of just penetrating power and light would break through. And when they did, uh, it would just make me shudder with like a good fear. It wasn't a fear of bad or evil. It was just a fear of like, this is amazing.
Right. Right. The
And
awareness of what you hear described in books, but not until you're actually experiencing it is that
yeah,
you're there. Yeah.
the way I often tell people is kind of like, just picture being alone on a beach one day, nice and quiet, and then over the side of the cliff, there's a roaring 747 coming to land right on the beach, right at you. Uh, and you're just consumed by this huge piece of machinery that's coming out of nowhere. It's going to rock your world,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of a small analogy of what it was like to be there, and then to discover that he talks, but he does not speak the way we do. He speaks in absorption like a sponge. It was really like I was the sponge and he was the water. And so he would flood me with like hundreds of messages, but
Okay.
they would just come in and they came in a flash, an instant.
Right. Right.
It's
It's not
just,
not it's not because we're so caught up in measuring time the way we do.
yeah.
So what happened?
So uh, he he had that moment of just flooding, and then I was overwhelmed, of course, and then I said to him, "Can I see you?" And he said, "No." Just that was not the way he talked all the other time. He talked in that sense just very direct, and the
Mm-hmm.
way we would speak. He just said the word no. And then after that, he said, "If I let you see me, you will be permanently dead."
Wow.
So I did not ask that again, and he went on to talk. I had, as all my siblings did, we had father issues, which
Okay.
most people listening would probably relate to that. Um, you know, dads can be a tricky thing, and
Mm-hmm.
our father, uh, one we were raised with, we had lots of issues with him, and we forgave him. Took a lot of time, but
Sure.
God, uh, he wanted me to know that he was a father, that was his one of his main messages, that he wanted to bring himself down to earth to me, that he's a father, but that he enormously cares for me, uh, and he also wanted me to know that as a father, he wanted to know that 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 we each have a duty. And he brought up an issue. He said, "It's like your dad." He said, "We had to cut the grass when we were kids," and he said that was your duty, and your dad expected that of you. He said, "I'm the same way. I'm just like a father. I expect the duty that you are given is to carry that out."
Right.
And
Let me ask you something. Do you think, looking back on that event, and I know this might be way out there, but do you think that that situation where you had that problem with your thyroid and basically it caused you to have that near death experience, do you think that was all pre planned so that you could have, I guess, with the closest you could call it a face to face with God the Father for Him to tell you that message? Or it was
oh,
just.
uh, I've often thought of that question. So yes, great that you're asking it. That has been a top question in my mind. And the only evidence to support what you're saying
Mm-hmm.
is I had, after I got out of college, I was still out of my master's. I still was in my early 20s. I finished early, like in 21, 22. I had a dream one night from, I thought it was from God. And in the dream, he said, "Free to be free and free to be me." And I had that two times, that dream, free to be free and free to be me. And I really felt like God was telling me, don't get hung up at this young age, uh, and I was rebelling inside against a lot of things from my parents, like the white picket fence and all
Mm-hmm.
this stuff. And I didn't want to do that route, especially because my parents were not, here you're living the white picket fence, but there's all this bad stuff going on in the house.
Sure.
So I rebelled against that, and but I didn't know where to go, because that's what you're trained to grow up and pursue. But God set me free. He said, no, he said, "You're free to be free, free to be me." So what I feel is that he set me up for, he knew that he would encounter me at a later age where he could just pull things together.
Right.
Uh,
In
to
other words,
not,
it was the right time for you to hear that message.
yes, uh-huh. He had that confidence that, well, look, don't get hung up on things, just live your life, because I'm going to encounter you out here anyways.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I look back on it, is he set me free just to go do and live the way. And that's when I got involved with starting that airline, People Express. My cousin and I both went to New York. We lived our own lives the way we wanted to.
Right. Right. And sometimes it's like, you know that saying, the teacher appears when the student is ready. Well, I kind of think of it sometimes. Maybe what you're describing is you got the message when you were ready. Maybe the circumstances were difficult,
Yeah.
but maybe back then, what you're describing, when you were like, doing this thing where, like you said, I'm rebelling. Maybe at that point, the message, you weren't ready for it.
Mm.
And
No,
it's all in
I
the timing.
and I had back then I had a lot of a lot of hate and unforgiveness and anger towards my dad, and then also my mom because she was complicit, and I was just not ready. And
Sure.
like you said, and then in my 30s, I went on, and between going to work every day in New York and the city life, once or twice a week I would see a psychiatrist, and
Mm-hmm.
I trying to work through these father issues.
Okay.
Uh, I did that for a couple of years, and then at age 50, I had the God encounter, and that's when God said, "Well, I know you tried to work on it with a psychiatrist, and we did make some headway. We made enough headway that I was able to start forgiving him.
Right.
Uh, but I'll tell you that time with God the Father was a complete rewire. I came back. I came back from that completely changed. It was so far gone and changed that starting that next day, if I would go to the grocery store, anywhere in public, for 2 years at least, people that did not know me would just look up at me and say, "Are you okay? Are are you here? Uh, you look like you've been through something." And this went on. So that was what really told me that something happened to me, was to having this multitude of strangers just confront me. For it's almost like Moses when he came down from the mountain. He carried like a glow about him. And that's exactly in my own small way what I experienced.
But let me ask you. Here you had a heart. What happened? You did somebody find you? They resuscitated you? How did that happen? Um,
Uh, I, uh, After God the Father, I was left out in the black tunnel that people describe.
right.
And so once I was in the black tunnel, I was frightened, but I had faith that I'd be okay. And that's when Christ, uh, he appeared at first in the shape of a pure white cross about the size of a football field. And then he came off the cross, and he came down, and he just hugged me. And that hug felt so amazing, so reassuring. And I said to him, "A day in your presence is better than 1,000 elsewhere." I kept saying that to him, and he was saying to me that I was going to go back, and I did not want that. I wanted. He knew I wanted to stay there, is what I was thinking. And while I was saying I want to stay there, my heart restarted, and I could feel the heart pounding out of the chest. And I looked up at my chest. It was like 2-3 inches high of pounding.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was really amazing. And I never at once thought I was in danger because of where I had been and what had happened. So I just laid there looking at my heart, and my reaction was, "Gee, I didn't know the heart could pound like that." And I'm just laying there thinking, I just saw God. And I'm
Right.
like, think, "Oh, well, I better not tell anybody because I don't think anybody would ever believe this." And yeah, I had,
And I can understand. It's like it's almost like what you're describing is basically you were dead,
yes,
but you're all
yeah,
you're thinking about is I got to keep this to myself because people are going to look at me funny because nobody's going to believe me.
yes.
And
No, Yeah, and I look up at the clock at the TV. It was 1:45, so I had been dead to the very minute, exactly 30 minutes. And it's interesting that I was able to see the clock from above when I departed my body. So that was strategic. I think God, He permitted me knowing exactly the time that I departed and also the time that I arrived. I was able to see both.
So
So
you come out of this, and it sounds like you realize I'm alive, but because I'm supposed to be alive. In other words,
yes, exactly.
And so did that and I'm glad you mentioned that it wasn't afterwards, the effects weren't a gradual thing. You came back changed from that encounter.
Yeah, completely rewired.
Okay.
Completely. I mean, people did not recognize me. My mom was still alive. She had no idea what had happened to me. I was completely different because I had been very angry before that. You know how parents can get on nerves, and
Sure.
so she would try to get me angered, and I would be like, whatever, and I would just go on.
Right. I mean, if anybody knows, yeah, a parent will know their kids, even what buttons to push. In other words, the same way we could do to parents know how to do it to us. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. She was trying for a couple of years. She was trying to push the old button, and you know what? I was rewired, so I'd be like, okay, well, let's go for a walk now.
That
Totally
was really. And did you ever tell her what happened?
Yeah, I did. And the funniest comment she had about it was, she said, what bugs me about this is, she goes, I go to. She was the type of lady, Catholic lady. She'd go to church like for the morning mass. They affectionately call them the church ladies. She was a church lady. She'd go every morning, and these little old ladies, they would all go to mass, and then after mass they go out for coffee together. So she tells me, she goes, I've been going to mass every day since like the 1960s, and she says, God has never done this to me.
Right. Yes. Right. It's like, how's that work? You know what? And I'm going to segue real quick because, and I'm not saying this is the same thing, but it's almost like, these Marian apparitions that they appear to children that usually are, even when they occurred, they were like basically very poor, and like at the Fatima and the Visitation at Lourdes, where there were doubts like, why would the Virgin Mary appear to these poor children? Yeah. Versus so many other supposedly more religious figures. And it's like, maybe what we think of as important in reality isn't.
That's what I learned. Same thing you're saying is God. Well, the irony of being a book writer at age 19 was the fact that in high school, they were so worried about me, they put me in a private reading and English class, sophomore and junior year.
Okay.
So here I am. I can't read or write. They think I'm stupid. And at age, and at age 19, God says you're going to write books. Now, that's what to make anybody laugh.
Right. That sometimes. There's a difference between can't and won't. And sometimes it's not a question of can't, it's a question of won't. Until that person is inspired or motivated to do whatever it is that maybe they've just been saying, I'm not going to do that.
Well, and that's where I think a lot of times God, the soul of each person has different gifts at work that come with the soul when they're born. Mm-hmm. And when those those gifts, when they're acted upon, or talents, I believe those things are stronger than any school system or any set of teaching. Yes, we have to go through those things, but what is I now I see the back on my life is what's sewing into the person is much more dynamic and more strong in their lifetime. Those will eventually shine through if the person acts on them.
Okay. So here we are. You've had this experience. You say right off the bat, that's it. You come back a different person. Mainly, and that you said that release of anger, which,
Yeah,
I've come across people that anger, it's almost like they train themselves to react in anger. In other words, show me how angry you are, and I'll tell you how scared you are. And
yeah,
they basically adapt themselves that this is how they react. And so here you're letting go of that anger, which that must have been great weight lifted off your shoulders, I imagine, right?
yeah. It really was. In fact, I had a lot of time to think after surgery. I was off work for 3 weeks, and during that time period, before the near death was approaching me any day now, I began to think about my dad. He was dead, and the one thing that occurred to me was he was human.
Mm-hmm.
I began. I get on. Maybe the surgery did that to me. Is getting cut open. Is okay. My dad was just human, and but that second thing I realized was, well, okay, well, he was just an even though he's my dad, in a good way, he was just an idiot like me. He's just trying to sort through life,
Right.
like we all are. And
Sure.
so I had this kind of very strange thinking that I never had before, like almost humanizing him instead of seeing him as this uh, dominant figure that that brutally ruled my life or something. And so when I saw him that way, I was reaching a really great, well, he's just like me. So I forgive him. And then bang, I have that encounter with God the Father.
Right. And it sounds almost like, but sometimes people say, well, I forgive this person, whoever the person is, whether it's a parent, but anybody that's wronged you profoundly. But
Yeah,
they really don't. They really haven't. They say they have, but they really haven't.
yeah,
But it sounds in your case like you really, like you said, you thought it out,
yeah,
um, and you really truly did it
yes,
inside of you.
yeah.
Uh,
It was thought of, well, oh man, this is amazing. He's not only my father, he's just a human, and he's just like struggling like I am, and that's that was what's so profound about that, and seeing myself in a more humble way, I guess, and then making room for him to be in kind of that human experience too. So that's where I reached it, and then I think God the Father wanted to play off of that and give me a dose of what it feels to be secure with the Father.
okay.
Uh,
So what happened then? I mean, you're here. You are. It sounds like you're making peace with something that had troubled you a lot, for your life. Um, and did you continue to have any of these dreams where you were seeing things or witnessing
yeah,
events?
see, that was on a Monday, Tuesday, that experience. So after the near death, on Wednesday night, I, I, it's almost like somebody woke me up. I sit up in bed, and my dad in the middle of the night is standing in front of me. And I just look at him and I say, Dad, and he disappears. He goes.
Okay.
So that was Wednesday night. And then now if he would have done that a week before, I don't know how excited I would have been, you know.
Yeah.
So a lot had happened in that week. So then Thursday night, the same thing. I pop up in the middle of the night. I sit right up in bed, and there he is. He's standing there a second time. So he doesn't say anything, but he's all dressed in black pants, black shirt, black hair. He doesn't look like he's in a good situation. So at the time, I had heard, I think it was Wednesday night in my office, that I heard a voice the night after near death. It was a locution. So an audible voice I heard, and it said, "Go help the homeless." So I had applied a block from my apartment building in LA to become a volunteer at the Weingart Center for Homeless. So a week later, I'm there at the Weingart in an empty little cubicle for volunteers. And my boss, who manages my 3-hour volunteer, pokes her head into my room, and she shouts, "Jim, Jim." And then she leaves. And then she comes back like an hour later, and she looks up into the center of the room, not even at me, and she shouts, "Jim, Jim." And that's it. And I'm a new person there, and I don't have any right to ask her why she's acting so strangely. I didn't know what to tell her because the whole thing was bizarre to me.
And you're thinking, that's not my name.
Yeah.
That's not me.
I'm like, what is this? Plus you're in this huge 300-person homeless bed facility, and I'm like, this is all bizarre. And so the third day that I'm there, she comes to my office like around 8, 9 in the morning. She says, "I need to talk to you." And I thought, oh man, I'm in trouble already, and I've only been here a few days. So she says, "Who's Jim?" And I said, "Well, Jim is in your family." I said, "Well, my brother is Jim, and my dad is Jim." She said, No. I saw an older man in your room twice yesterday. And here she sees, I don't know her. I've never met her in my life. She now has seen the guy that I just saw a week earlier in my bedroom, in my apartment.
Oh.
And I said, "You mean you saw my dad?" She goes, "Yes." I said, "Well, why was he there?" And she said, "Well, he was very curious. He was wondering why you were here and what you were doing here." I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. So
wow.
when she kind of collaborated what had happened a week earlier, and the fact that she has no relationship to me, I've never seen her in my life, and then basically all of this father stuff comes together with a third party person that doesn't even know me or my family.
Do you think that the fact that you had forgiven your dad actually allowed him to manifest easier or closer to you?
Yeah. The fact that I had forgiven him, I believe, released his soul to move about, to explore, and maybe to love in a way that when he had died, he was unable to do.
Okay. Because he had passed away how many years by then, by the time this happened?
So that would have been like he would have been gone about 2 years.
Okay.
So,
babe,
then,
do you think he was coming to you for help?
Yes. I hooked up a week or so after with a spiritual director. Somebody at the church near my office, because I went in there one day just to try to sort out what the heck was happening to me. And I ran into an elderly priest, and he said, I told him what happened. He goes, oh, we have a guy that knows all about that stuff. And they set me up with this guy. Like within 2 days, I'm in his office, and he's now seeing me once a month to walk me through what had happened to me. And that's what he had said. He goes, you really are there to help your dad right now. So I began to pray for him and to send out good vibes and transition for him. And then one night in my apartment, I lived in a penthouse in downtown LA. At about 6 a.m, instead of waking up like I normally do, I went out of body above the penthouse, and I could see the streets of LA below me. And then I descended out of body into the earth, into the ground.
Okay.
And as I descended, I went through segments of brick walls, those stone builder type blocks. And every time I descended through a new set of rooms and blocks, I became more frightened that I would become stuck down there. But then Christ came next to me and he said, don't worry, he said, I'm with you and you will not get stuck. So I ended up deep in the earth in a private room about the size of a maybe a medium-sized bathroom, and my dad was sitting at a chair at a small round table, and it was dark and smoky or foggy, and in the corner was a man, and I looked at the man as to who he was, and he said, don't worry. He goes, I'm taking good care of your dad.
And you didn't recognize that man, though?
No. The later I found out through my spiritual director that was probably his guardian angel. So I put my arm around him. His head was just down, and he looked really dejected. But I put my arm around him. And I think at that time, like you said, I think I really officially released him with forgiveness, with some love and compassion. Maybe something he had not received even from other people.
Possibly.
Yeah, because even my mom at that time was mad at him. In my book, I tell the story. She came home one day and Holy Spirit just came upon her and said, yes, this man has done everything that your children are telling you that he did. And when she came to that realization, man, she went crazy mad. She ripped his face off of all the photos.
Wow.
She did not want to even think of this guy.
Let me ask you something. Did you ever know enough about his earlier life? And by this, I'm not justifying it, where he had similar, where he came from a family where basically this is where he learned it?
Yes. I don't know the details, but that's probably after surgery where I started to go in my head.
Right.
That, like, yeah. Oh my God, I probably went through the same stuff,
Right, exactly. Right, that you start, and you made a very good point. You start humanizing him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, oh my God, I went through the same thing. He was a child just like me.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Just like the light bulbs came on,
Let me ask you, once you had that experience, What happened did with the relationships that you had as far as friends and everybody? I mean, family's family. Sometimes, for better or worse, there they are. But did it affect your other relationships, like with friends or coworkers or anything like that?
Well, it did. I got fired from my job.
Okay. Okay.
I hear, here I am. I've got a good job as a writer in Hollywood, and they're like, all of a sudden, every day, I wanted to be over at that church by the office at the end, like 5:30.
Mm-hmm.
They're all mad at me, and they expect you to stay hours afterwards. So finally, I guess I had the near death September. By November 15th, I was fired.
Wow.
And then close friends didn't really want to have much to do with me because I just wasn't the same person anymore. And they just found that I had kind of like a neurotic Woody Allen way about me that I guess in some respects before the near death was kind of funny and people liked it.
Mm-hmm.
But then after the near death, I had this, I lost that edge. I was kind of just calm.
I was going to say, you mellowed out. It was like, what's wrong with you? You're so mellow.
It's like, well, where's the guy that, we'd always have fun with,
Mm-hmm.
And I could not drum it up. So at the Christmas party, I was invited to this huge Christmas party in December. They evidently, some of my friends had a talk and they were going to confront me. So they confront me at this Christmas party at a high rise on Sunset over on the west side of LA. So I'm in this really nice party, and two of the guys come up to me with their cocktails, and the one girl from work, one of the ladies, and they're like, we want to know what your story is.
Oh. They're like, what's going on? Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to spill exactly everything that had happened since September.
You told them?
Yeah.
Okay.
They had a slight idea, but I had to really go through the whole. By then, I had a lot of details. I had the story of the lady in downtown LA. The lady comes in and shouts, "Jim, Jim." So I went through the whole thing with them that night, and they look at me like, "You're crazy."
Mellow but crazy.
Yeah. So,
and did they believe you?
And I think they did. I think, but as I told Father Frank, it's almost like a lonely, right after near death, or say like people, maybe someone that was in 9/11 or any kind of experience that only you can vouch for. It's probably anything of that magnitude is hard for others to connect with.
You know
and
what?
So
But
that
I imagine part of them have got to be saying, that's so way out there. It's got to be true. Like saying, if he was going to tell us a story, that I'm sure that must have thrown him for a loop.
Yes. Yeah, it's like, because they did not know why I had so drastically changed. And even that night at the Christmas party, I was just very chill. I was very mellow. I'm just like, oh, this is cool. I'm having a great time. I didn't talk much. I'm like just totally at peace,
Okay, exactly.
So,
And I'm sure that, see, I guess for a lot of people, it's weird to see somebody change so drastically.
Yeah.
From one moment to the next.
Well, it's like that guy Howard Storm. He was an atheist in the 1980s, and then he and his wife are on vacation in Paris. He has appendicitis. He dies in a hospital at midnight. He realizes he's at the gates of hell, and he starts the Star Spangled Banner, and he doesn't know any prayers. He's atheist, and the Pledge Allegiance to the flag, and that's what gets him out of hell, got him up. And when he came back, he was like me. He was completely rewired, and his wife divorced him.
You know what? It's because I think that the change is so profound that it's like, this is not the person I was with. And can you imagine you're married to an atheist, and now all of a sudden he's everything but?
Yeah, this guy, he comes back, and all of a sudden he's not an atheist anymore.
Yeah.
And she said, she actually goes on record. He has a book out too. His name's Howard, not Howard Stern, the show guy. Mm-hmm. It's Howard Storm. And he has a book out about how after a few years, she was just very honest. She goes, Howard, you're not the guy I married. I don't want to be married to you anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, people get... Yeah, and it's really funny because not even though it's the same thing, but even people that have some type of addiction, and once they go sober, sometimes their significant relationships fall apart, including a marriage, because that person, even though you would think, well, wouldn't they be happy that this person is now being sober?
Yes.
They can't grapple with that new person that they're with. So
right.
A lot of times significant relationships fall apart.
Well, I noticed that because my mom being the only one alive, she distanced herself at first because she couldn't push my buttons anymore, and didn't know where to go with this relationship. Then my sister called me. My older sister called me about a year and a half ago. She was pretty distant, but all of a sudden she called me because now it's been over 10 years, and I'm permanently like this new someone that her and my mom did not like, So now she calls me and she tells me that she was kind of like agnostic, atheist, and now she turns to God, all because I not only changed, but I remained that way for 15 years.
Right, right, exactly. So it wasn't a fly-by-night like, I'm gonna, yeah, exactly.
And I think that's what happens. People are looking like, oh, this is an act, Who could act this kind of stuff out? It's
a phase.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, well, who could even try to pull this kind of stuff off? It's impossible, But still, they're skeptical. But I'll tell you, she finally called me, and then she wanted to know like what prayers I was praying, and what kind of like what's the magic? How do you make this happen?
You know what it is? That probably she senses the peace about you. In other words, like you said, the anger's gone. So it's like, I want that peace.
Mm-hmm.
And
I know. Yeah, that's probably what it is. Because she has a lot of anxiety. One of the things that started in high school was being able to see the future. I saw a good half dozen air crashes during those years, and they all happened. I just didn't know the dates of them.
Right.
But if we ever talk again, I could share. I have had so many visions of the future, of really what's going to happen over the next year or two, and I'm to the point now, Marlene, where I am so confident in the visions because I was groomed from such a young age.
Right, and that's exactly like what you said before. You were like, "Is this me and my great imagination?" Or
yeah.
And
See
now
now,
you have your own. How can I tell you? You become your own skeptic in a way.
yes, uh-huh. I was. I was for many years, and now I've seen all of these 40, 50 years come to pass.
Hmm.
So now, what I know to be a year from now and 2 years from now, I am 100% confident. But when I share it with friends, or I share it with people, they think,
I just dropped a bottle on my dogs because they're
"Oh,
doing
don't
the
worry."
same thing. That's the same thing. Keep going. I'm sorry.
So yeah, I'm 100% confident that what I know is going to happen over the next year or two was shown in visions and dreams. But people on the outside, when I share it with them, even my close friends,
Hmm.
they're like, "Oh well," they just kind of like humor me, you know. Oh, like, "Oh, okay, we'll wait and see." And I'm like, "No, I'm telling you, this stuff is going to happen. You got to be ready for this, you know."
Well, let's face it. I think that the last, if you want to share them, by all means, do it. Because I want to say that I think it's a human condition that everybody always wonders, well, what's going to happen. But I want to say in the last 18 months, a lot of people think of that more often than ever before.
Yeah.
Yeah, because things have changed so drastically and very quickly, much more than
Yes.
people ever thought. So whereas perhaps people were saying, yeah, they kind of thought it, but they were so caught up with their daily, multitasking that they weren't really paying attention to it.
Yes.
Um, and now everybody's like, what is gonna happen? Like, yeah, everybody's on, unless you're a child or very elderly or living under a rock, everybody's paying attention to that.
I would hope so,
Hmm.
because I tell people, "Hey, you're trying to humor me and maybe think that I'm crazy, but please just read the headlines." And
Yes.
I don't even have to say because the headlines will clue you as to what's going on.
Right. And
Uh,
and I want to say, part of it, because we've been so distracted because there is so many distractions. How can I say that? Between your phones and computers and the internet and TV and binging on a show and working and children, that we've become very distracted, and things years pass us by. I tell everybody, I remember when I was a kid, you would say a year and it'd be like, oh my god, that's so long. A year. Nowadays a year slips by in the blink of an eye, and this is not because I'm
yeah.
older, but it just does. All of a sudden it's like, what do you mean it's now? I tell everybody, I remember when 2001 was rolling around. I mean, 2000, the Y2K thing.
All right. Yeah.
Everybody's like, oh, computers, are going to collapse because they don't know how to handle the new 2000. And they made a bunch of movies in Hollywood. And
Yeah.
that was it. Nothing happened. But back then, I remember that that was one of the few times that everybody was like really worried, like, what do you mean? And then, of course, technology, it just took off in leaps and bounds. And here we are 20 years later. And yeah. So if you want to share any of your visions, by all means, please do so.
Yeah. You want to share some now, or do you want to
Yeah,
wait for
do it.
another?
I mean, give us a little bit and I'll bring you back and we'll do a part two. I have no problem with that. But
Yeah.
considering what's going on, that everybody's
Yeah.
just a big giant question mark.
There's some of the some of the prophecies, or what we would say visions, that began to clue what was coming forward first occurred in 1998. I was still in Miami in those years, and in my apartment, for those that know Miami, the Hamilton on the Bay, I was living in that building at 36th Street. And one night, in the middle of the night, Christ comes to me out of nowhere. This is like totally unexpected. And he says, "I am going to return within 2 generations." Those were his exact words.
Okay.
And in 1998, I wake up and I'm thinking, what just happened to me? This is like incredible. And why is he telling me this? But then, of course, I had the history of the book and then my brother, so I'm thinking, well, this is not that strange. I'll live with the fact that he did this and told me. Uh, so that was even before 9/11. But
Mm-hmm.
I took what he said to heart. But then he began to build on it through the near-death experience in 2005. So in 1998, I get the first message that this is a closing period of our lives, plural, everyone. So then,
Mm-hmm.
in the year 2012, going into the winter spring of 2013, a number of prophecy visions. The first one was he came to me one night and said, when this new pope gets elected, he said, I will return within his generation. So that was the time when Benedict had retired.
Right.
And here I am, I'm sitting in limbo like in January 2013. And the Lord's, he's saying, guess what? When they elect the new guy, that's the generation I'm going to return in. So now he narrows it down from what I heard in 1998. And I get, it's almost like he's turning up the heat, and I get a greater sense of urgency from him.
Mm-hmm.
Then about, I would say 2 or 3 weeks before the election of Francis, he came again in the night and he said, when this Pope is elected, I will come within his time. And then I told him, I said, Lord, I said, because I didn't know who it was going to be anyways. I said, but Lord, I said, these popes live forever. That's what I told him.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, I can't believe I had the nerve to say that. And I'm like, you're telling me you're going to come in this guy's lifetime. I'm like, it could be 100
That
years.
could be a long time.
Yeah. And then he used the word no to me. He goes, no. He goes, it'll be within 10 years, just like that.
So are we talking 2023?
Yes. Uh-huh. Yes. And I've had to live with this, Marlene, all these years, which for God is nothing, but for a human, this is a lot. I had to live with this. And so I say to him, okay, I understand. So in the following years, I began to share with anyone that would listen to me. I even started that blog, Sons Shall Prophesy, because I had to get the word out. And people thought that I was crazy, but I would always say about 2023. Well, about a year ago, he came to me in the night and he said to me, he goes, I just have an issue that I want to clear up. He goes, I never told you 2023. I told you within those 10 years.
Okay.
So he said, it could be fall of 2022. It could be Christmas 2022. And then he said, at the very latest, it could be spring of 2023.
Yeah, we're talking a year away, more or less.
Yeah.
Take.
Yes.
And what do you think? How can I say it? What's the sense that you get about why he's telling you this?
I look, of course, I look back from the high school days, and that, of course, it's obvious that I was being groomed uh, to become more responsible with larger visions.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because he knew that eventually I was going to have to drop the big one, you know.
Right.
So he spent all this time, especially that little mix up on the book. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
he groomed that, Marlene, because he wanted me to see that uh, uh, don't try to outguess him, you know.
Right.
Uh,
He
he's in charge.
right, right, exactly. Like you kind of like were trying to like tell him you were wrong, and he's like, not really. Like, yeah, because he sees around the curve.
Yes, uh-huh. So so I think that uh, based on what happened, this was about a month or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
I had an hour and a half with my new spiritual director. I've been with my new one now for about 5 6 years or more, and I said that the Lord came one day during the day while I was studying, and He told me that just for our information, that His coming is actually in two drops, two ways. The first is that about a year from now is what the Protestant uh, would call the rapture. So
Right.
he did not use that word though with me. He called it private. He said, "I'm going to privately return for a private encounter about a year from now."
Okay.
So that I think he wants people to realize that that private encounter is, he told me, is only going to be about 50% of people that believe in God. So
Okay.
50% will be ready and 50% will not be ready for that private encounter.
Okay. All
So
right.
the more people that know, uh, and like you said, that are not obsessed and overly focused with their uh, their lives and the world and living in the world. People that are more balanced over the next year, they're trying to include a higher power and a higher goal in life. He isolates that that's only going to be about 50% of the people.
Yeah,
He
I could see that. I can see that. Yeah.
I mean, some people have said that they thought it would be less, but I said that I have documentation because not only did he tell me that, but he said the 10 virgins parable, 5 were ready and 5 were not. So in that parable, he already identified the 50% factor.
Mm-hmm.
But also, he also told the story about the people in the field. He said one will be plowing and one will be taken. And then he also said 2 will be in the house, one will be taken, one will be left. So he reiterated the 50% factor in other parables.
Okay.
And that's the private encounter. But a lot of people, including myself, have confused and thought that the private encounter and the public are all one. And
Okay.
so there's a lot of theologians that still argue that it's all one event. But the Lord said, no, it's not. It's 2 events.
Right. And I think a lot of people, not all, but a lot of people. I want to say if there's any positive effects of like the last 18 months is that people, besides wondering what's going to happen, have started to become a little bit more spiritual if they weren't already, I'm saying,
Yeah,
because I hate to say it, but uncertainty does that to human beings.
yeah,
um where, and I'm by this I don't mean religious per se, but the that spiritual part of their lives that before they kind of like put on the back burner
Yeah.
and they didn't pay attention to, that I think personally, I think your soul needs it. They've
Hmm.
brought it out and they've examined and they realize, you know, I I I need comfort from this part of myself because, you know, all these other things that are going on, if not, in other words, this was the part of my life that is going to give me some type of peace
Yeah.
amongst all this uncertainty.
Yes.
And hopefully, um, do you think that what he's saying is that we're talking about something drastic happening among humanity, or just what's the word I'm looking for, or just
From
a question of discernment for some and not for others?
from what I've been hearing through, I've recorded them all over since the publication of Proof of the Afterlife 2. I always knew after that I would never have time to do book 3 because he would have returned.
Mm-hmm.
So, in answer to those ones that came after the publication, I believe that he has been saying that people should get ready over this next year
Mm-hmm.
for other events. There's
Right.
going to be things this year that will, through like your thoughts about inspiring people to seek out a higher relationship with God. Those are going to happen this next year. Just a month ago, he told me in the nighttime allocution that there was going to be in this winter spring period, there's going to be a lockdown. And he said, when this lockdown comes, he said, I'm only suggesting that you be extra cautious because not only is there the imminent danger, but there will be other dangers if you go out. And he was trying to say that once the lockdown is official, if we go out, people are going to behave in dangerous ways.
That I believe.
Uh,
That I believe.
yeah.
Yes.
Hmm. He said you're going to put yourself at risk because people are going to become greedy. They're going to become violent. And so the lockdown, he said, is not the only danger. He said the exact words that he gave were that there will be additional dangers. But those that go through this will, some people will use it for good and get
Mm-hmm.
themselves ready for the private encounter.
You know, I was born and raised in Miami, and I went through several hurricanes, including Andrew, which was really, you know, bad back in '92. And and I've told my audience before, this is a small measure compared to, you know, when we're talking here a much larger scale. But I know what happens when you described where looting takes place, where um, from one moment to the next, what was safe becomes unsafe. I've
Yes,
lived that firsthand, and that was on a much more tiny scale, you know. Um, but you know, I remember down in the Homestead or South part of Dade County, which is the one that Andrew plowed through,
yes,
where you, if you had something left of your house, people were basically living with some type of firearm, afraid that what little was left was going to get looted because there was looting taking place.
yes,
This was
yes,
happening, and of course, um, and I saw it myself. I saw stores being ransacked. I saw that
yeah,
firsthand. Where the day before I had been shopping, the next day I saw it being ransacked because, and and what you're describing is things fall apart in that sense very, very quickly, very quickly.
And that's exactly over this, before the private return of the rapture. That's exactly what he said is coming forward for us in 2022, leading up to that private coming. He also said that one night he told me that he plans to tell the children prior to that private coming. So if children, if the children of a household start talking to their parents, saying, I had this dream, or I heard that something, Jesus said that he's coming. Well, he told me that he's going to do that for the kids. And I think he wants the children to not go through the 7 years of tribulation, because after the private encounter, the 7 years, the whole world is going to fall apart, starting in sometime in 2023 until his public return in 2030.
Right, exactly. And
yeah.
I hate to say, there's a lot of people that wonder if a lot of the recent events are basically the beginning of this phase.
Yes.
Of, people that thought, well, this is just biblical, whatever, anything, but none of that is going to really happen.
Yes.
But
this is the problem, you kind of like in the day of Jonah and in the day of Noah, you have these isolated people that have information about the future, but try to get people to trust you. It's very difficult,
Sure. And let's face it, it's an uncomfortable possibility to face, even though a lot of people have been in the last few months. I've had a reality, that wake up, hello, reality check, but still, it's an uncomfortable thing to be recognizing that this is a distinct possibility of that this is going to happen, because let's face it, we are all creatures of habit, and we're used to first world problems. Is like, I ran out of coffee, my coffee maker. Oh no, that's a first world problem, and we don't want to think of something beyond that, which obviously this would be.
Well, I have a dear cousin. She's, when I tell her about these things, she's like, she's got a son now in his, he was a CB in the Navy, and now he's their grandchild. And she says, kind of like, don't tell me about this stuff, because she says, I want to see my son and his family grow up, and I want to see my grandchild grow up. And it's almost like she feels like that this might rob her of her day-to-day plans for her life,
Sure. Yeah, we all love continuity.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, trust me, this is going to be so much greater and so much better, than what you could envision for yourself. But it's hard to explain that to people. And so I guess that's part of that continuity, is that when they hear it, they want to dismiss it. I have pastors and leaders, when they hear this from me, they just use their power and authority, like, he's a wacko, nobody listened to him, and they try to dismiss the whole thing because they just want that continuity of the collection plate to take in the money, pay the bills.
Exactly. Their focus is on something else, and your narrative doesn't fit in.
No.
You wouldn't be the first one that's been like, and you're like, hey, don't shoot the messenger.
I'm always I'm telling people, I've been very fortunate. I've gone through 3 spiritual directors since 2005. and they've all been champs. I mean, they've all really like been like, yeah, there's something real here. I've been very fortunate because a lot of people end up with spiritual directors that just can be very mean, and they can be like like condemning. And,
Sure.
but I've never had that from these three guys. They've all been, yeah, you are going through something very apparently very genuine.
Of course. Of course. And people don't realize that mean people can infiltrate even religious organizations that that you're supposed to be all the opposite, and people trying to figure out how did this person get into here, but it does happen. It does.
Hey, I got called into the archdiocese, I guess a few months after my near death, because I was telling all kinds of people about it, So they called me into downtown, and I meet with the assistant to the cardinal, and I thought that they were calling in, just to hear more about, what God the Father is like, his personality, what the other side, but actually the guy slams fist on his desk and he says, "Don't you ever talk about this to anyone again." That was that meeting,
And you must have been like, well, why not? I mean, considering you were expecting a different response.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, I was like a sheep led to slaughter. I had no idea that that's what could happen. I was just really very innocent, thinking, oh, this is going to be a good meeting. They just want to know about the near-death experience.
You know what? I hate to say it, but sometimes it's a power grab. It's like, wait a minute, you're not a priest. You haven't taken holy orders back then. We're the conduit to God. What are you talking about? That you spoke to him and you're telling everybody? Probably that's when you take power away from somebody. That's how they react.
Yeah, because you're right. Because they think, well, this later I figured out was, well, okay, if this person talks about this, then they may have people listening to them.
Exactly.
And then if people listen to them, what if he one day says, well, Cardinal so-and-so is not a good cardinal?
Sure.
All a person would have to say is one little thing like that. And if they already trust what he's saying from the other side, then he could cause complete havoc in the whole diocese.
Of course. Plus,
I didn't know this,
No, you're like thinking, I'm just telling my story. And yeah, but you know what? And I hate to say it without knowing the particulars of the people we're talking about, but people that are power hungry are always vigilant for any challenges to their power from the very beginning. In other words, they don't let it develop into a problem. They nip it at the bud, like what they were trying to do with you when they brought you in and told you, be quiet and don't talk about that again.
Yeah.
It's like, let's clip his wings. No, he can't talk about that because, like you said, who knows where this could lead to.
Yeah, I didn't know that this is... and then pretty much anywhere I went, that's the way. And then even at my work and everything, I got fired. It basically set off a chain of events where bosses and diocese, I mean, all of a sudden I'm all the way at the top, shaking doors, and I don't even know why it's happening, But at least later I figured out that was documentation that what I experienced was real.
Right.
So
let me ask you, because I want to say, and I know it's a religious organization, but it's almost like politics. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it sounds like you weren't expecting that approach.
No, not at all.
No, you were just talking about, hey, I had this experience.
yeah. And then of course, I went to St. John's Seminary in the
Mm-hmm.
diocese, and that's when uh, I get called into the president's office because they had a board meeting of 6 officials there, and they said, we don't want you talking about your homeless people. We just want you to go to school and finish your seminary training, because I was getting ready to take my vows and all that.
But why
And then,
couldn't you speak about your homeless work? Why? Of all
yeah,
things.
yeah. What obviously now I'm thinking, it threatened them. It threatened their perception of religion, uh, because religion is to them is supposed to be these rituals,
Mm-hmm.
kneel down, stand up, say these prayers. That's what makes a person religious. But now you got this guy in the seminary showing that maybe you become religious by helping the poor,
Right.
uh, and that now threatens them. And then the fact that I had the near death, so they said, and we don't want you talking about your near death
Wow.
experience.
In other words, they told
So
you shut up and just be
uh,
quiet and don't talk about any of that.
that's right.
Wow.
They said, we want you to go to your room and stay there and
Yeah.
just do your work, you know. And so then they thought I was going to cause all kinds of problems, but I didn't say a word in that meeting. And actually, I started to levitate during that meeting. So here you got 6 people with all this hate and anger. I'm sitting there with this supernatural Valium going through my veins. And all of a sudden, I start to go up from my seat. And I was embarrassed by it, Marlene. I was like, oh my God, I don't want.
I'm sorry I'm laughing, but I can just imagine what you must have been thinking. You must have been like, what is going on?
Yeah, uh-huh. I'm thinking, I don't want to embarrass these people because they've got to know that what they're doing is very evil. Uh, so I grabbed onto the table with my hands and I kept myself down. And I did not want them. I was trying to protect them. That was my main thought. I didn't want them to have to go through this kind of embarrassment of their evil thoughts.
So
So,
what did you do after you got out of that meeting? Did you do what they told
so
you?
after that meeting, I wrote all 6 people a note, and I said, uh, and I put it in their inboxes. I said, I just have to thank you for such a wonderful meeting today. I said, if you would have brought me in there and thanked me for serving 80,000 homeless people, I would have been embarrassed. You would have embarrassed me, and I really feel like I don't deserve that kind of acknowledgement. And I said, the fact that you went the opposite road in that meeting made it a much better experience for me. And
Boy, I bet they didn't expect that type of note.
no, and then that got them more mad, which is what I heard through the grapevine.
Yeah.
So whatever note I would have done would have gotten them mad. Say, if I would have really, what most people would have done would just said, "How dare you talk to me like that?"
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I went the other road, and they got mad at that too.
No, but still. And you know what? It's really funny what happens when people can't push your buttons. They don't have control, because when somebody can push your buttons, that means they can control you. And when they can't,
Exactly.
they get mad.
Yeah.
That's how it translates.
Um, My spiritual director was in the room that day with me, and after the meeting, out in the hall by ourselves, he puts his arm around me. He goes, "You know what? He goes, we've never had anyone in seminary ever handle this the way you did. And I said, well, I said it was, I had supernatural help. And see, Marlene, the week before that meeting, I did not know that meeting was coming a week before. But a week before, I recorded in my journal, I was sitting up around 3, 4 in the morning in my dorm, and we have those real tall Mediterranean windows in each of the dorm rooms, double windows. The Lord appeared in those windows. He opened the window. He walked to my bed. He picked me up and he asked, "Can I take you?" And then all of a sudden, I went into like a dream state. And of course, I said yes. And I do remember going out those double windows with him. And he brought me back after I don't know how long. And then he neatly tucked me back into bed. Okay. And so I had that burned into my soul the week before that meeting. Okay. So in that meeting, I was thinking, you know what? There isn't really anything you guys could say to me that would ever surpass what just happened to me a week ago.
Right. Exactly. And I understand. It's like by comparison, one thing to the other is like, okay. So you're upset with me. Oh well.
Oh well,
that's what ends up happening sometimes when people, that they're used to controlling others with their anger or with their, I'm disapproving of what you're doing, and people are like, oh no. So it sounds like you were like, well, okay, what am I gonna do? You just, you could say it's me, but in reality it's you and what's going on with whatever your agenda is. And it sounds like you recognize that.
I did. Well, and I got real connected with St. Teresa of Avila. I read a few of her works, but one of them, she had a lot of these, what she called ecstasy experiences, where Christ came and he lifted her and took her. And so I was told to read her, and I did. And it was really through her explanation of these experiences that she called the term consolation. So from the other side, they will send consolation to the person in advance of their encounter with evil. And so she kind of enlightened that, when these things happen, these are consolations to kind of prepare the person.
Right. And you recognized it as such.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So
let me tell you something. So now you're working with the homeless in LA. Is that where you're at right now?
Yes. Mm-hmm. We have in the region, we have 80,000 homeless on the parks and streets.
Yes. So, and that, I imagine you must be very busy.
Yeah, we're in our 20th year now, and in 2001, an elderly man who was in prison ministry started going under the bridges. Mm-hmm. His idea was to go to very remote, underserved homeless. And so in 2004, when I moved to LA, I happened to meet him one day. I knew about him. Okay. I helped him personally. And then all of a sudden I had the near death, and he's like, "Oh, good, you take over." So Jack disappears. He's like almost 80 by that time. Okay. And then I took over, and then we formalized, and we called it Well, my spiritual director said, he said, call it Servants of the Father of Mercy,
Okay.
because of that encounter with the Father.
Wow. What's the for my I'm going to put a link in the credits of the show. But what for my podcast listeners, what's the website that they can go to find out about the work you're doing or about yourself?
Yeah, the servants of the Father.org,
Okay.
at that website, it's with an S, plural, servants of the
Mm-hmm.
Father. We have a little section in there, help for the homeless, if people
Okay.
want to give a donation.
Sure.
Um, but uh, the book itself is proof of the afterlife.com.
Okay.
And there's a lot of testimonies. There's even testimonies from kids, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh graders that read the book.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that kind of book. It really relates to all ages, because it's really about mom and dad, brother, sister. It's really about the basics.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. It has been such a pleasure to speak to you, Brother Gary. I would love to have you back on so you could talk more about, your experiences, whether it's your visions, your work with the homeless, all of that. I would love to bring you back, and I'll be contact you probably after the first of the year. And I hate to say it because
Yeah,
we're almost 45 days out from 2022. Wow. See what I mean
yeah.
about time flies even when you're not having fun.
I'm
As
telling you.
in so and it has been great to speak to you, and again, I'm going to include a direct link in the credits of the show to your website, and my podcast listeners already heard that it is. And you said you're
Yeah.
not going to write a book number 3, and I understand
No.
why you say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
The only thing now is to do a show like yours, and
mm-hmm.
I have so many uh, visions and locutions that all started to occur 2019, 2020, 2021, that there's a lot to share with folks.
Sure. Do you think things are going to pick up steam after the first of the year?
Yes, I thoroughly expect that the Lord said that a lockdown is coming. Something is going to happen soon, and then basically that will bring us to the rapture of the church sometime in the fall,
Okay.
uh, and maybe the winter. And then after that, people that are here should be prepared for seven very, very terrible years.
Oh, it is what it is.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie to you. I wish you were wrong, but I have a feeling that you might not be. It's
yeah,
like
that's how I am. I wish I
I'm a
was.
wimp. I'm a wimp. I admit it, and I'm like most humans that we're wimps of the creature comforts, and
Yes,
unfortunately, it's like said before. Sometimes that distracts us from our spiritual life into being
yeah,
more open to that part of our humanity, which we want to
right.
think that we're just strictly our physical bodies, and we're not. We really aren't.
Well, all it takes to be included in that private event within the year or so is just people have to humble themselves and just tell God, uh, I don't know it all.
Of course.
I would be on your side because you know it all, and to really enter that realm of humility.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but nowadays, you get people firing off at each other on the internet, like
Oh,
you don't being
no.
USB. Everybody acts like they know it all.
Right, exactly. Everybody's an expert. How's that?
They are, yeah, yeah. It's like crazy.
Everybody's an expert. Yeah, yeah. It's unfortunately that's the truth. Again, thank you so much, and good luck on all your projects and all your work.
Yeah, same with you, and a big hug, and God bless you for all you're doing.
Likewise. Take care.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Wow, guys. Yeah. See, I love speaking to him because this is his story. If you listen to it, goes back to his his high school days, where he starts having these visions. And because I have heard of people that have had near-death experiences that they come back changed, exactly like what he described. They come back, whatever they saw, exactly like what he said. People that are spiritual become more spiritual, kinder, more forgiving. People that were atheists or agnostics come back with a profound belief in God, if you want to call it God or the divine, whatever. But in other words, they do a complete about face in their spiritual lives because of this. And what he described, where one of the things that he experienced was that anger was gone. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are listening to me that know of somebody or more than one person who basically is angry all the time. They're either angry or simmering, but it doesn't take much to put them over the edge. And you could be nice and say, oh, that person's a grouch, or they're cranky, or whatever, but they always seem to be on some scale, on some point of the anger scale. All right. And it's almost like they've acclimated their themselves to being that way. Whether they identify with it, whether they get some type of release in their brain that makes them feel better when they get angry. And he describes where after this experience, that anger is gone. And I'm thinking to myself, that must be such a huge weight. Because being angry, I don't know about you, but when I get angry, like really angry, like all human beings, when I'm off of it, I'm like, oh, it's like, I don't like it. I mean, when you're angry because in that moment, but then it's like, I don't like that. I don't like that experience. And, but that absence of the anger, I think definitely, without knowing for sure, okay, Trouble, stop that. You guys have behaved very badly today. All right, and I apologize for those people that part of the this thing that sounds like I had a 3-ring circus going on. I'm telling you. But anyway, where I think that act of true forgiveness in himself, or that beginning of that understanding towards his dad, is what all of a sudden he went from in other words, being able to see his dad through whatever maybe his dad had to go through to reach some type of even self-forgiveness. Because believe it or not, I think maybe in the process that we go through after death, it's not only the forgiveness of others that we've hurt, but sometimes it's even self-forgiveness, even if you think that person is not sorry while they're doing it. You see what I mean? So I really do think that him being able to kind of like humanize his dad is what allowed him to see him again and to actually start thinking, how did my dad come to behave the way he did? And that was, I think that's a very profound thing. Because let's face it, all of us have people in our lives, some more than others. Some of the things done against us are more egregious than others, absolutely. Where, like I said, I wasn't kidding. There's a lot of people that, because you hear about the you need to forgive and all that. Some people say, oh yeah, forgive them, but not really. And I think that as long as you say it, but don't really have that experience of forgiveness, you could say it till you're blue in the face. And by the way, my understanding is that when you forgive somebody, some people could do it right away. I think it's for other people, it's, when you're taking something apart, that if you could get your finger in and you could it's almost like once you leave that little opening for forgiveness to start, where in his case, let's say you humanize the person, or maybe you realize that what drives them. In other words, it's a process that once it starts, and before you know it, you arrive at what is truly forgiveness for that person. Might not be acceptance, and might not be that you, how can I say, approve, but that you understand it and you forgive it, really on a soul level, not just saying, oh yeah, I forgive that person, and inside it's anything but that. Almost I want to say what he said where when you think of this person or what happened, that quick anger is gone. Doesn't mean that if it was something that was wrong makes it right, but that quick outburst of anger, of self-defense is gone because you start seeing that person a different way. There's a forgiveness. That's what forgiveness is. And basically at that point you've escaped the shadow of things that happened to you, right? Because as long as you live in that state of unforgiveness, you are being, depending on what it was, traumatized, victimized by what happened. Even if that's not your reality now anymore, you're still living in the shadow of those events and maybe what this person did to you, or lack of, because sometimes it's not what's done to you, it's the person. And he made mention of that he was mad at his mom for his mom being complicit in whatever happened. So whatever the case might be, once you start letting that forgiveness seep in, it's almost like all of a sudden you don't live in the shadow of that anymore. It doesn't overshadow your actions, your thoughts, your reactions. And for him, for some people, there's a lot of people, by the way, that arrive at that without the near-death experience. By all means, you don't need an NDE to get there. A lot of people do it on their own. They reason it out. They become adults, or they come to this point that they say, this anger is wearing me out. I'm unhappy. And you know what? Time travel is not possible. I can't go back and redo these episodes of my life. And I'm spent, and I don't want to do this anymore. And then little by little, they start letting go of it. But in his case, he had the near-death experience. And it's obvious that of all the things that changed in him, the most noticeable, it sounds like, was this lack of anger, and the way he was, that even his friends are saying, like, what's wrong with you? To them, what's wrong with you because you're different. You've really changed, like, and it kept going. It wasn't like, oh, a couple of days I felt sick, you feel bad, you're having a moment here. No, this was continuous for months. Even it sounds like his friends were going to have like an intervention. Like, what's wrong with you? We know something's going on. But yeah, you don't need an NDE to get there. Like things of that nature. And it sounds like where what direction he took his life in, and now he's serving the homeless in LA, which I imagine, I was not kidding, because let's face it, I'm sure here's the news, how many homeless there are out in LA, especially. Then I was thinking, man, you must not have a moment to yourself, because out there's a lot of people that, I'm sure come to organizations like the one he has, looking for help, whatever the help might be. Clothes, food, counseling, a shoulder to cry on, God knows, or all of the above. So like I said, I am going to, and as to his predictions, I don't know. I really don't know. I wasn't kidding. I think that sometimes a lot of our technological advances, especially in developed countries, let's say like the United States, I'm not going to say everybody, but our spiritual lives have kind of been put on a back burner because we're absorbed by daily life. We're absorbed by living life. We're absorbed by technology, as in the phone, the computer, that we're like instantly on demand. I'm going to give a perfect example. My children, which are fully grown, will call me. And if I can't answer the phone for whatever reason, either I'm doing a show, sometimes I leave my phone here because I'm outside feeding my chickens. And if I don't have pockets on me, I don't want to, Mom, why didn't you answer the phone? It's like, okay, because I was feeding the chickens, or I was on another call, and what I'm saying is that this instant demand kind of lifestyle and technology, and it kind of absorbs us, and it distracts us away from Because before you know it, it's the end of the day, and I got to go to sleep and wake up the next day, and it distracts us away from our spiritual lives. All right. And I personally, this is my personal belief, I think that our spiritual lives, regardless of what your beliefs are, I'm not saying any denomination or non-denominations, I'm talking spiritual as in, I believe we are spiritual beings, that we do so at our own risk, because I think that for us to complement the whole of our humanity, we need that spiritual part of us needs to be nurtured, accessed, contemplated, whatever, for some people, let's say if you're Catholic, you do the rosary. I know Buddhists, they also have prayer beads. For other people, it could just be, I'm going to go sit outside and I'm going to look at that tree, whatever. To some people, it's attending religious services. Some people, it's contemplating the ocean. A lot of times we skip over that. We lose that. And it happens to everybody because, like I said, our daily life consumes us. And then, of course, we're distracted. TV shows, binging on a show. And by the way, I'm not putting down all of those things. I'm not. It's great to have. Modern life has a lot of advantages and creature comforts. I have no problem with that. What I do have a problem is that it takes us over. Okay? And then sometimes people have all these material things, all right, but they're still not happy. They feel like something's missing and they can't quite figure out. Like they always thought, well, when I get this car, this house, this job, this significant other, then I'm going to be happy. And then when you're there, it's not what I thought. And they kind of overlooking the obvious, which is that their spiritual lives, they just don't acknowledge it. They put it on the back burner unless there's a crisis. And then maybe whether it's a health crisis for themselves or somebody else, or something happens. And that's what I was saying. I think that the last 18 months have made a lot of people look at what their spiritual needs are. All right. As far as realizing I need to feed this side of my life in order to make my daily existence more complete. And the reason why I say this is a lot of people, once upon a time, and I'm sure you've heard about this, where people did religious or spiritual practices almost to make sure I get into heaven. Like when I die, I don't go to hell. If you were Judeo-Christian, and even I know other religions have their own versions of hell or punishment, whatever. And it was almost like, I want my guarantee, especially as when people got older sometimes. But it was never like, it's not the destination, it's the journey. And I know that sounds very trite and very new age-ish, but it's pretty accurate, where that part of your spirituality is part of what eases your daily existence. As in, let's concentrate on these 24 hours and what helps me get through it, what calms me, what helps me. Not because I'm thinking down the road, I want to say this, I want to be part of the rapture. And by this, I'm not saying I believe in it, but in other words, that there's almost that fear component where if you don't believe or do certain practices, you are not going to be part of the group that gets saved. No, I'm talking about a spiritual practice that feeds your soul, not anybody else's, because we all have, we're the only ones that are in our skin, that helps us continue on a daily basis to have the best, how can I say, existence, a daily existence, that one day leads to the next and helps you, whether it's a good day, whether it's a normal day, whether it's a difficult day, or weeks or months, because sometimes all those things are strung together by days, by daily existence. And let's say we're in the third dimension in modern times, and we define a day as in 24 hours, that kind of thing. That we have something that, and I want to say, for lack of a better word, you can have religious, you can go to a temple or a church or listen to a religious leader or certain dogma. That I have no problem with that if that's part, but real true comfort is something that only dwells within you per se, as in each of us individually. All right. And I'm hoping that a lot of people start incorporating that into part of being alive. Okay. Just being a whole human, like I say, connection to other human beings, I think is very important. All right. And by this, I mean, because I've said in other shows, and I think that one of the things with computers and the internet that's robbed us is that before, people used to go out and meet people and had that face-to-face interaction, or people watch. I once upon a time when malls were really popular, you would go to the malls just to go shopping and people watch and eat at the food court, and you'd spend the whole day there. But it was because you loved the interaction of all these people going here, going there, going to the store, and then, look what I found. And I remember the mall days, and that was great. And believe it or not, we do need that human contact. And I think we cheat ourselves of it when all we do is Zoom calls. And I mean, I understand, don't get me wrong, I understand the necessity of it under certain circumstances. It's expedient business-wise. Whereas before, you had to fly people in to have a meeting, or let's coordinate this. Now everybody just, puts on their camera and here we are. That's great. And there's other times where this is just the best way to do it. But at the same time, there's something said for the face-to-face thing that I think we lose out on. We do. And by the way, I'm kind of more of an introvert than an extrovert. For those of you who think, because you're a people person, you like to be, not really. I'm kind of more of an introvert than an extrovert. But still, humanity needs humanity. Whatever the case might be. Again, guys, thanks for coming and being part of my audience. I hope you like the show. I've got a lot of interesting other guests lined up. Probably the last 2 weeks of December, I don't schedule any guests because it's the holidays. Everybody, including myself, which I think more people should do, is paying attention to the holidays. Family, getting together with family, bringing families over, preparing whatever, yeah. So probably the last 2 weeks might not be interviewing guests, because again, I find my guests, my potential guests, have their own things going on, so it gets really hard to coordinate an interview. So I'll probably be doing some true crime shows for those last 2 weeks in December. But between now and then, come back. I still have a lot of great shows lined up. So again, thank you. Thank you so much for being part of my audience and for coming back every week. Take care.